At my daughter's wedding, her fiancé introduced me to his boss as an unemployed loser. He thought he was being funny. He thought humiliating me would make him look successful in front of the CEO. But he didn't know that the man he was trying to impress was the man I hired 20 years ago to run my company. That CEO turned to look at me, broke into a smile, then fixed his eyes on the groom and said, "You are fired." The ballroom went utterly silent. Welcome back to Honor Revenge Stories, where the truth always finds a way to the surface. Before we go any further, if these stories speak to you, tap subscribe, so the next one comes straight to you. I would love to know before you hear how this one ends, what do you most hope to take away from a story like this one? Drop it in the comments. Now, a brief note, some details in this story have been shaped for dramatic storytelling purposes, and any resemblance to real persons or events is entirely coincidental. What matters most is the message at the heart of it all. Donovan Ashford was the kind of man who lived loudly, spent recklessly, and owed everything to borrowed time. He held court at the center of the ballroom, white tuxedo blazing under the gilded pendant chandeliers, looking every bit the prince of a kingdom he'd mortgaged to the hilt. I hung back near the kitchen entrance, wearing the only suit I'd kept, a navy wool blend from the 90s that smelled faintly of cedar and old leather. From the shadows, I watched my daughter Lyra, radiant in a gown that cost more than the down payment on my very first house. She looked happy, but her eyes wouldn't stay still, skipping from Donovan to the guests to me. She was ashamed. I could feel it in the way she hesitated before bringing anyone over to introduce them to her father. To her, to every person in that room, I was just Corny the old man out in a wooden cabin on the edge of town, driving a rusted Chevy pickup, spending his days on the water with a fishing rod. Donovan caught my eye and waved me over. It wasn't an invitation. It was a summons. He was holding court at the VIP table, the one reserved for the people who mattered most in his world. And seated there was a man I knew well, though he hadn't laid eyes on me in 5 years. Mr. Mercer, the current CEO of Drumright Logistics. The man I had personally groomed to take the reins of my empire the day I chose to disappear into the background. "Come here, Corny," Donovan called out, his voice cutting right through the big band music. "I want you to meet someone." I crossed the room slowly. My knees ached. 40 years of loading cargo trucks before I ever owned the fleet had left their mark. As I reached the table, Donovan rose and dropped a heavy arm across my shoulders. It felt like a yoke. He reeked of aged bourbon and self-satisfaction. "Mr. Mercer," Donovan said, his voice slicked with a greasy counterfeit charm. "Meet my father-in-law Cornelius. He's quite the character." Mercer looked up from his plate. Behind his tortoiseshell frame glasses, his eyes narrowed. He was trying to place my face, but the beard I'd grown and the 20 pounds I'd shed since retirement were working well as a disguise. Donovan didn't wait for any reaction. He kept squeezing my shoulder hard enough to leave a bruise. "Corny here is a simple man, lives way out in the sticks, hasn't worked in years, actually. We do what we can for him, toss him a bone now and then. Honestly, though, the man's a bit of a loser. I told Lyra we had to invite him out of pity. Can you believe the truck he drove here sounds like a riding mower?" A few people at the table offered nervous laughs. Lyra, standing just a few feet off, let her eyes fall to the floor. She didn't speak up. She didn't say a word. She simply stood there while her husband carved her father down to a charity case to impress his boss. A cold fire lit inside my chest. Not anger, clarity. For months I'd had my suspicions about Donovan, that he wasn't remotely what he claimed. I knew he held a regional sales director title at my company, but nothing about his life lined up with that salary. The penthouse, the sports car, a wedding that ran $200,000. He said he was a rainmaker, a top performer. Standing there listening to him perform for Mercer at my expense, I understood the truth. He wasn't just a liar. He was a fool. I glanced at Mercer. The CEO had set down his fork. He was watching me now, the utensil frozen midway to his mouth. Something was shifting behind his eyes. He looked at my old suit, then at my face, then settled on the class ring on my right hand, the twin of the one he was wearing. The ring I'd personally presented to my top 5 executives the day we crossed our first billion. "Corny," Mercer whispered, his voice catching. "Is that you?" Donovan laughed, oblivious to the current running beneath the surface. "Yeah, that's Corny. Don't sweat it, he won't be asking you for work. He's too busy watching the paint dry on his porch." I said nothing. I simply reached up, straightened my tie, a specific knot I had taught Mercer to tie decades ago, and held his gaze with a single, barely perceptible nod. It was a command. The same look I used to send across the boardroom when it was time to cut a bad deal loose. Mercer stood up. His chair scraped hard against the floor, slicing through the table chatter. He didn't glance at Donovan. He didn't glance at Lyra. He looked only at me, and in that moment I watched the terror move across his face. The terror of a man who suddenly sees. He's let a hyena walk into the lion's den. "Mr. Ashford," Mercer said, his voice cold and loud enough to reach the surrounding tables. Donovan straightened, ready to receive what he assumed was a compliment. "Yes, sir." "You just called this man an unemployed loser," Mercer said. "Yeah, just a bit of fun, sir." Donovan flicked his hand through the air, keeping the mood light. "It is not fun to me," Mercer replied, his face drained of color. "This man is not unemployed, and he is certainly no loser. He is the reason you have a job, or rather, the reason you had one." The smile fell off Donovan's face like grease off a hot pan. "What?" "You're fired," Mercer said, his hand cutting the air like a blade. Effective immediately, fired for gross misconduct, for a complete absence of judgment, and frankly, for being an idiot. The music seemed to die. The silverware went still. 300 guests swiveled toward the VIP table. Donovan stood there, mouth working open and shut, like a fish hauled up onto a dock. "Fired," he stammered. "You can't fire me. It's my wedding day. I'm your top salesman." "You are a liability," Mercer said. "And if you ever speak to this man with disrespect again, I will see to it that you never work in this industry again. Get out of my sight." Mercer turned toward me and dipped his head, a gesture of deep respect, a soldier saluting his general. I kept my face stone still. I had no intention of revealing my full identity. Not here, not tonight. I wanted Donovan to twist in the confusion a while longer. Donovan's gaze swung from Mercer to me, his expression curdling into pure rage. He couldn't make sense of what was happening. In his mind, I was the source. I was the bad omen. I was the smudge on his perfect white tuxedo. Lyra gasped, both hands flying to her mouth. The champagne glass she'd been holding slipped from her fingers and burst apart on the marble floor. A sharp, violent crack that snapped the room out of its trance. I looked at Donovan. His face was climbing toward a dangerous shade of purple. I reached out to a passing waiter, lifted a glass of sparkling water from his tray, and took a long, unhurried sip. "And this water is flat," I said, my voice carrying through the silence without effort. "Just like your manners, Donovan." He lunged, hands shooting for the lapels of my old suit. "You did this!" he screamed, spittle spraying from his lips. "You old senile fool! What did you say to him? You ruined everything." Security, who Mercer must have quietly signaled, materialized, instantly pulling Donovan back before he could reach me. He thrashed against them, screaming, blaming me, blaming the world, blaming everyone except the one person who had earned it. I turned my back on him. I stepped to the table, lifted a linen napkin, and brushed a speck of dust from my sleeve. The wedding was finished. The war was only starting. And Donovan Ashford had no idea he had just declared battle against the man who owned the battlefield. Donovan didn't merely get angry, he shattered. The weight of what Mercer had said hit him like something physical, and rather than absorb it, his mind simply refused it. It was easier to conclude the world had gone sideways than to accept he had brought this on himself. He stood there, chest-heaving, eyes ricocheting between Mercer and me with a wild, manic energy. "You're joking," Donovan laughed, but it was a hollow, frantic sound that pushed the nearest guests a step backward. "This is a test, right, boss? You're checking my loyalty, seeing if I hold up under pressure. Well, I can handle it. Good one, sir. You really had me going there for a second." Mercer didn't smile. He didn't blink. He adjusted his glasses and fixed Donovan with the cold, clinical detachment of a man watching an insect writhe. "I am not joking, Mr. Ashford. You are fired. Leave the premises immediately, or I will have you removed by force." That was the spark that found the powder keg. Donovan's face went from confusion to something raw and violent. The sound that tore out of him wasn't quite human, more animal than man, and he threw himself across the table. Not at me this time, at the man who had just incinerated his future. "You can't do this to me," Donovan screamed, his fingers clawing at the air just inches from Mercer's throat. "I made you millions. I am the star of this company." The security guards ringing the perimeter moved with practiced efficiency. Two of them cut Donovan off mid-lunge. One wrenched his arm up behind his back, while the other locked a thick forearm across his chest. The force of it sent all three of them crashing into a serving table loaded with crab cakes and floral centerpieces. The sound-shattering glass collapsing metal tore through the ballroom like something had detonated. Ice scattered across the polished floor. Sauce and garnishes sprayed across the silk dresses of the bridesmaids. The guests shrieked. This was no longer a wedding. It was a brawl. "Let me go!" Donovan howled, thrashing against the guards. He managed to kick out with one expensive dress shoe connecting with a chair and sending it flying into the crowd. "Get your hands off me, do you know who I am?" Lyra stood frozen in the middle of the room, both hands pressed to her mouth, watching the man she had married 20 minutes ago turn into something unrecognizable. Her eyes found mine, pleading desperate, begging me to intervene. I stood where I was. I took another slow sip of the sour wine. This was a lesson she had to witness for herself. She needed to see the face beneath the mask. The guards finally managed to pin Donovan to the floor. His white tuxedo was smeared with red cocktail sauce, a stain that looked disturbingly like blood. His hair hung in disarray over wild, frantic eyes. He lay there panting, spitting profanities at the ceiling, every shred of dignity stripped clean away. "Get him up," Mercer ordered, brushing a speck of sauce from his lapel. "And get him out of my sight." As the guards hauled Donovan back to his feet, the atmosphere in the room made a hard turn from shock to judgment. Guests were whispering, pointing phones, raised and recording. The illusion of the perfect power couple had evaporated entirely, leaving behind only a violent, jobless man and his terrified bride. Donovan shook the guards off the moment he had his footing, though they held their position ready. He smoothed his ruined jacket with trembling hands, chest still heaving. His eyes swept the room, the cameras, the stairs, the wreckage of his grand day. He needed somewhere to put the blame. He needed a target because a narcissist cannot turn the mirror on himself. His gaze locked onto me. "This is your fault," he screamed, a shaking finger aimed at my chest. "You did this, you and your bad luck. You walked in here looking like a beggar and you poisoned everything." He wheeled on Lyra, who had dissolved into quiet sobs. "And you let him in. I told you not to invite him. I told you he was nothing but trouble. Look at what he did. He turned my boss against me. He probably fed him some sob story just to make me look bad." Lyra shook her head, tears running freely. "Donovan, stop. He didn't say anything. You were the one who insulted him." "Shut up!" Donovan snapped, his voice cracking down the middle. "You are supposed to be on my side. I gave you everything. I gave you this wedding. I gave you this life, and you let your loser father tear it all apart." He was unspooling, venom spraying in every direction. He called me a curse. He called me a parasite. He insisted I had spent years envious of his success and had engineered the entire scene to humiliate him. It was delusional, but he believed every word. He had to. It was the only way his ego could hold its shape under the pressure. Then the heavy double doors of the ballroom swung open. A man in a sharp black suit strode in, two assistants trailing him with clipboards. The hotel manager. He did not look pleased. He surveyed the upended table, the demolished floral centerpiece, the sauce pooling on the floor. The guests pressed into the corners of the room. "Mr. Ashford," the manager said, his voice slicing through Donovan's ranting. "We have a problem." Donovan spun around, face flushed and damp. "What now? Can't you see I'm dealing with something?" "We've had multiple complaints from neighboring ballrooms regarding the noise," the manager said, steady and unhurried. "Beyond that, there is substantial damage to hotel property, and violent conduct is a direct violation of your contract. I am shutting this event down immediately." "Shutting it down?" Donovan let out a short, manic laugh. "You cannot shut it down. I paid a fortune for this." "You paid a deposit," the manager corrected, glancing at the clipboard. "The remaining balance of $30,000 was due at the event's conclusion. Given the breach of contract and the damage I'm looking at right now, I'm invoking the immediate payment clause. I need that balance settled at once, or I will be contacting the police to file charges for property damage and theft of services." $30,000. The number hung in the air like smoke. The guests went quiet again. The music had been dead for some time. The only sounds were the hum of the air conditioning and Lyra's soft weeping. $30,000, Donovan repeated. He looked at the manager, then at the guards, then toward the exit. He was cornered, and he knew it. He squared his shoulders, trying to recover some appearance of command. "Fine, I'll settle your bill, and then I'm going to sue this hotel for destroying my wedding." He reached inside his jacket and produced a sleek metal wallet, drawing out a black credit card with a flourish and holding it up like a declaration. Here, take it, run the whole amount. Add a tip for yourself, maybe buy a new attitude. The manager accepted the card without expression. He nodded to an assistant who produced a portable card terminal. The card went in. The amount was entered $30,000. The machine was passed to Donovan for his PIN. He punched the numbers in hard, glaring straight at me the entire time with naked hatred. Watch this, old man, he sneered. This is what money looks like. The machine beeped, a flat, harsh sound. Declined. The manager studied the screen, then looked up. I'm sorry, sir. The card was declined. Try it again, Donovan snapped. It's a platinum card. There's no limit on it. The manager tried again. Beep. Declined. Donovan snatched the wallet back and produced a second card. Beep. Declined. A third. Beep. Declined. He was sweating through his tuxedo, now tapping the terminal, shaking it as though he could physically force a transaction through. There must be a system error. Call the bank. This is a mistake. There is no mistake, sir, the manager said, his voice dropping a register. These cards are either maxed out or frozen. Do you have another form of payment? Bios bespond de cornberry. Donovan turned to Lyra. Do you have your card on you? She shook her head. You told me to leave my purse in the suite. I don't have anything. He looked around the room. His friends studied the floor. His parents were nowhere to be found. He stood entirely alone, a $30,000 debt around his neck, and the specter of handcuffs drawing closer by the minute. Then his eyes landed on me again. Something shifted in his expression. A desperate calculation. He crossed the floor toward me, invading my space, his breath hot and sour. You, he hissed. You pay it. I looked at him steadily. Excuse me. You heard me. Donovan barked, his voice bouncing off the walls. This is your fault. You got me fired. You caused all of this. You're the father of the bride. It's tradition for the father to pay. So pay it. He jabbed a finger at my old suit, at my worn shoes. I know you've got savings stashed away somewhere. In a mattress, in a coffee tin, I don't care. Write a check. Do whatever you need to do. But you are not walking out of this room until you fix what you broke. He seized my lapel again, his eyes bloodshot and wild. Pay the bill, old man, or I swear to God, you will never see your daughter again. I reached into the inner pocket of my frayed wool jacket. The motion was slow, deliberate. Every eye in the room followed my hand. Donovan stopped breathing. His pupils flared, greed and relief chasing each other across his face. He was certain he'd won, certain his threats had done their work, and the old man was about to produce a checkbook and bail him out. I saw the tension bleed from Lyra's shoulders. She exhaled a shaky, fragile breath, believing her father was about to rescue her from the disaster she had married into. She looked at me with gratitude, but beneath it I could see the assumption. She expected me to pay because I had always paid. I drew out a single cream-colored envelope slightly bent at the corners and held it out to Donovan. Take it, I said quietly. He snatched it from my fingers like a starving man grabbing the last scrap of food on the table. No, thank you. He tore the flap-open hands, shaking, hunting for the check that would wipe his debt and restore his self-image. He pulled out what was inside. It wasn't a check. It wasn't cash. It was a greeting card, a simple card with a picture of an oak tree on the front. Donovan stared at it. He flipped it over. He shook the envelope upside down, hoping something else would drop out. Nothing did. He opened the card and read the handwritten message inside. I had written it that morning over a mug of black coffee. Independence is the greatest gift a father can give. Congratulations on your new life. Donovan looked up at me, his face twisted with disbelief. Is this a joke? He spat, hurling the card to the floor. Is this some kind of sick joke? I need $30,000 and you hand me a greeting card. It's not a joke, I replied, my voice level. It's a lesson. You told everyone you were a self-made man, Donovan. You told everyone I was a loser. A loser cannot help a winner. You are on your own. Lyra rushed forward and seized my arm, her nails pressed through my sleeve. Daddy, please, you can't do this. The manager is going to call the police. They'll arrest him. Please just pay it. I know you have savings. I know you have the money from Mom's life insurance. Just give it to him. Do it for me. I looked at my daughter. I looked at the woman I had spent a lifetime raising to be strong, independent, and kind. And what I saw looking back at me was a stranger, someone willing to drain her father dry to shield a man who had just finished humiliating him in front of 300 people. I have paid enough, Lyra, I said, my voice firming. You haven't paid anything. You just gave us a card. I haven't paid anything. A bitter sound escaped me, half laugh, half exhale. Let me remind you of a few things, daughter. Who do you think settled the loan on your red Audi last year when Donovan missed 4 months of payments? That wasn't the bank being generous. That was me. Lyra went still. Her eyes widened. Who do you think put up the down payment on that condo in downtown Nashville that you two love to brag about? I continued, letting my voice rise just enough to carry across the hush of the crowd. You told people it was Donovan's bonus. Donovan told people he was a real estate genius, but I wrote that check. I sent it anonymously to the closing attorney so you wouldn't lose the deal. Donovan stepped back as though the floor had shifted under him. He knew. He had always suspected, but he had never allowed himself to admit that the lifestyle he'd performed for the world had been quietly funded by the man he despised. And the credit card debt, I said, turning my eyes directly on Donovan. The $50,000 you burned through online gambling last Christmas. You told Lyra you won a lottery scratch-off to cover it. There was no lottery. I paid the bookie myself because I didn't want men with baseball bats turning up at my daughter's door. I moved a step closer to both of them. I have spent $200,000 over the last 2 years cleaning up your wreckage. I did it from the shadows because I wanted you to have dignity. I wanted to give you the chance to stand on your own. But today you showed me what you actually want. You don't want dignity. You want a servant. You want an ATM. Lyra was crying openly now, mascara streaking down her face. Daddy, stop. Please stop. Everyone is listening. You're embarrassing us. I am not embarrassing you, I said, my voice gone cold. You embarrassed yourselves. You introduced me as a loser. You introduced me as a burden. Well, congratulations. The burden is gone, and so is the bank. Donovan dragged a hand across his sweating face, his eyes skipping around the room like a cornered animal. He saw the guards drifting closer. He saw the manager tapping his watch. He needed a lifeline, and he realized he had one card left. Lyra, he barked. Use the emergency card, the one your dad gave you for medical emergencies. High limit. Use it. Lyra looked at me, then at Donovan. She hesitated. Do it, Donovan screamed, or I'm going to jail. Lyra reached into her purse and produced a small silver credit card. It was a supplementary card tied to one of my private accounts, one I had handed her 5 years ago with a single instruction, life or death situations only. She had never touched it until now. She walked toward the manager, hand trembling. Here, she said, her voice barely audible. Try this. I didn't move to stop her. I didn't reach for her hand. I simply slipped my fingers into the pocket of my trousers and pulled out my phone. Not a smartphone, an old rugged brick of a device I kept for secure communications. It looked like something a foreman would have carried in the early 2000s. Donovan spotted it and let out a short laugh. Look at that. He's calling for help on a dinosaur. I didn't look at him. I dialed a short code. 90 $90. A direct command to my banking mainframe, a kill switch I had built into this specific account for exactly this moment. I pressed send. The manager took Lyra's card. He swiped it. He waited. I watched the machine. I watched the red light blink. Declined, the manager said. Lyra gasped. That's impossible. My father said it had $50,000 on it. Try again. The manager swiped it again. Declined. Card invalid. Please confiscate. He looked at Lyra. I'm sorry, ma'am. This account has been frozen. The bank has instructed me to retain the card. He tucked the plastic rectangle into his breast pocket. Lyra turned to face me, her expression a portrait of betrayal. Daddy, what did you do? I returned the brick phone to my pocket and patted the side of my leg. I cut you off, Lyra. You chose him. You chose the man who mocks your father in public. You chose the man who spends money he doesn't have. You chose the man who values appearances over character. So the two of you can face the consequences together. That is what marriage is. Donovan roared and lunged toward me, but the guards were already moving. They drove him into the wall and had him in handcuffs before he managed 2 steps. That's assault! He screamed as they dragged him toward the exit. I'll sue you. I'll sue this hotel. I'll sue every last one of you. The manager turned to his staff. Call the police and have the invoice ready for the legal team. I straightened my jacket. I glanced at Mercer, who had been watching the whole scene with a grim measured satisfaction. He gave me a single nod, a quiet acknowledgement that the scales had balanced. I walked past Lyra. She reached for my hand, but I stepped clear of her. Daddy, wait, she sobbed. How are we supposed to get home? They took the car keys. They take the bus, I said, without slowing down. It builds character. I pushed through the heavy ballroom doors. They swung shut behind me, muffling Donovan's screaming and Lyra's crying all at once. I crossed the lobby and stepped out into the cool night air. My rusted Chevy pickup was waiting in the valet line, sitting right alongside the Bentleys and the Mercedes. The valet attendant held out my keys. "Ready to go, sir." I took them and climbed up into the cab. The engine turned over with a rough sputtering growl, the exact sound Donovan had always hated. I smiled. It was the sound of freedom. I pulled away from the hotel and left the wreckage in my mirrors, knowing full well that the hardest part hadn't arrived yet. They would come for me. They would come for my land, and I would be ready. 3 days went by in a silence that sat heavy, like the stillness before a tornado makes contact with the ground. I spent those days on my porch whittling a piece of cedar and watching the road. I knew Donovan wasn't finished. A man like him, stripped of his ego, and his income doesn't quietly disappear. He detonates. I just didn't know when the shrapnel would start flying. It came on a Tuesday afternoon. A black SUV hammered up my gravel driveway, throwing a rolling cloud of dust across my freshly washed truck. They didn't pull in and park. They skidded to a stop inches from my front steps. Donovan threw open the driver's door and climbed out. He had the look of a man who hadn't closed his eyes in 72 hours. Expensive shirt, gone wrinkled eyes shot through with red, moving with the loose, twitchy energy of someone running on fumes and fury. Lyra got out on the passenger side. She looked smaller than I had ever seen, her shoulders drawn, in eyes tracking the dirt at her feet. Donovan didn't knock. He kicked the front door open. The old wood cracked and splintered around the lock, the sound ripping through the small cabin like a shot. He came barreling into my living room, trailing the smell of stale sweat and desperation behind him. "You think you're smart, old man?" he screamed, his voice breaking. "You think you can torch my life and sit here playing with sticks?" I rose slowly from my armchair, my hand closing around the handle of my pocket knife. "Get out of my house, Donovan. This isn't a house," he spat, spinning to take in the room. "It's a shack, a termite mound. I don't know how Lyra survived growing up in this filth." He swiped a ceramic vase from the mantel. It was a modest blue thing, slightly lopsided and imperfect. My wife Odette had shaped it with her own hands 40 years ago, in a pottery class we took together. It was the first thing she ever made. "Don't touch that," I warned, my voice dropping to something low and dangerous. Donovan looked me dead in the eye and hurled it against the floor. The ceramic exploded into pieces. He ground the shards across the room, with his heel crushing the memory of my wife into the dust. "Oops," he sneered. He snatched a framed photograph from the side table. It was the last picture taken of Odette before the cancer claimed her sitting in the garden, smiling, wearing her favorite sun hat. "And this garbage," Donovan yelled, "belongs in the trash." He flung it out through the open door. It landed face down in the dirt of the front yard. My heart hammered against my ribs with a ferocity I hadn't felt in years. Every instinct told me to go at him, to bring him down. But I stayed planted where I was. Violence was his native tongue. If I met him there, he would own the story. I had to beat him the way I knew how. Donovan reached into his jacket and produced a thick legal envelope. He drove it down onto my small dining table hard enough to rattle the salt shakers. "Read it," he commanded. I didn't move. "Tell me what it is." "It's a lawsuit," Donovan announced, puffing out his chest. "Defamation of character, loss of income, emotional distress, malicious interference with a business contract. I am suing you, Cornelius. I am suing you for $5 million. I glanced at the envelope, then back at him. $5 million, I said, keeping my voice level. "You don't have $5, Donovan." "I will when the court is finished with you," he shouted. "You fed lies to Mercer. You slandered me. You destroyed my reputation in this town. I can't land a single job interview. Nobody will touch me. You stripped everything from me, so now I'm going to strip everything from you." I looked at Lyra. She was standing just inside the door, refusing to let her eyes fall on the broken vase or the photograph lying face down in the dirt. She was trembling. "Lyra," I said softly, "is this what you want?" She didn't answer. She just wrapped her arms around herself, like she was trying to hold something in. "Don't talk to her," Donovan barked, stepping into my sightline. "She's on my side. We're a team, and we both know you don't have $5 million in liquid assets. We know you're broke, but you have one thing." He reached into his other pocket and pulled out another document, wrinkled and marked with a coffee stain. He smoothed it flat on the table beside the lawsuit. "This land, he said, sweeping his hand around the room. It's the only thing you own. I checked the county records. You hold it free and clear. The cabin should probably be condemned, but developers are moving up along the highway. He jabbed a shaking finger at the page. It was a quitclaim deed. Sign it. Transfer the property over to me. I can move it fast. It won't touch the $5 million, but it'll put cash in my pocket enough to keep the bookies satisfied and hire a lawyer to go after Mercer. I walked to the table and looked down at the deed. He wanted my home, the place where I'd raised my daughter, where I'd nursed my wife through her last months, where I'd found the kind of quiet I could never buy back in the corporate world. You want me to sign away my home to cover your gambling debts? I asked. It is not a home. Donovan screamed, his face going red. It's a patch of dirt with a roof on it. Look around you. It's pathetic just like you. Sign the paper, corny. It's probably worth $50,000 if we're lucky. That's just enough to keep my kneecaps in one piece for another week. A short, dry laugh moved through me. You think this land is worth $50,000? It's dirt and weeds, he said, waving a dismissive hand. What else would it be worth? I picked up the deed and read the legal description carefully. He hadn't bothered to read it properly. He'd seen a cabin and a driveway and stopped there. Donovan, I said, my voice flat and cold. You look at this and see a shack and a garden. You see exactly what's in front of your face, but you didn't look at the survey. I stepped toward him close enough that he had to tilt his chin up to hold my gaze. This cabin sits on 50 hectares of land, I told him. I bought the surrounding parcels 40 years ago when everyone was certain the highway would never reach this far out. I own the timber rights. I own the mineral rights. And last year the city rezoned this entire sector for commercial development. Donovan's eyes went wide. His jaw came unhinged. This land isn't worth 50 $50,000, I said. It is appraised at $12 million. The silence that followed was absolute. Even Lyra looked up, her eyes wide, all pretense gone. Donovan stared at me, then slowly rotated to take in the cabin around him with an entirely new expression. The contempt had evaporated. In its place was something raw and ravenous, the look of a starving wolf who has just stumbled onto a slaughterhouse. $12 million, he whispered. You are sitting on $12 million and you live like this. You drive that wreck of a truck and wear these rags when you've got $12 million under your feet. I live like this because I choose to, I said. Because my memories are here. Because my wife is buried beneath the oak tree out back. You see a price tag, Donovan. I see a sanctuary, and I will not sell a single square inch of it to bail out a leech like you. Donovan's shock curdled back into rage, but now it was laced with envy. He pulled a pen from his pocket and drove it into my chest. Sign it, he hissed. Sign it right now. You owe us. You owe Lyra. You've been sitting on this wealth while we struggle. That is selfish. That is evil. Sign the paper, old man, or I swear I will burn this place to the ground, with you still inside it. No, I said. Donovan hurled the pen across the room. It cracked off the wall and dropped into the fireplace. He paced, running both hands through his hair, muttering under his breath. His eyes moved from the lawsuit, to the deed, to me. He understood he couldn't physically force this, not without stepping across a line he wasn't quite ready to cross. But then something kindled behind his eyes, a malicious idea taking shape. He drew out his phone. Fine. You want to hold the line? You want to keep your precious sanctuary? Let's see how much you love it when the county condemns it. He dialed a number and put it on speaker so I could hear every ring. Building department. Heck, yes, I'd like to report a serious code violation. Donovan said, his voice smoothing into a performance of civic concern. I'm at 312 Cedar Ridge Road. The structure is unsound. The foundation is rotting and there's exposed wiring throughout the building. It's a fire hazard. I'm genuinely worried it could come down on the elderly man living here. He caught my eye and winked. Yes, I'm a concerned relative. Please send an inspector out as soon as possible. The place needs to be condemned. It needs to be demolished for the occupants' own safety. He ended the call and turned to face me with a grin that bared every tooth. You won't sell? Fine. Then I'll let the county knock it down for you. Let's see what your $12 million land is worth once your house is a pile of rubble. We're leaving Lyra. He grabbed my daughter by the arm and pulled her toward the door. Enjoy your last night in your shack, old man, he called back over his shoulder. The bulldozers are on their way. The heavy tires of a municipal truck ground over the gravel, announcing the arrival of the executioner Donovan had summoned. I watched from my rocking chair as the white pickup rolled to a stop beside Donovan's black SUV. The contrast said everything the city vehicle worn with honest work. Donovan's car, a monument to leased luxury and maxed out debt. The building inspector climbed out. The man wore his authority like a wrecking ball. He swung the truck door shut, hitched his belt, and came striding toward the porch. Dark aviator shades hiding his eyes. Clipboard locked in his grip, every beautiful ray of morning light lost on him. Donovan moved to intercept him, his face lit up with the kind of joy that only vengeance produces. "Right over here, officer. This is the property in question. Like I told you on the phone, it's a genuine hazard. The wiring predates me, and the foundation might as well be poured from mud. I'm scared to death it'll come down on top of my father-in-law." He jabbed a finger in my direction, half accusation, half theater. "Just look at him. He's afraid to stand up because the floor might give out under him. We need an emergency condemnation order. Get it bulldozed before somebody ends up buried in it." The inspector stopped at the foot of the steps. He studied the siding. He drove his steel-toed boot into a support beam. The wood didn't budge solid as the day I set it, but the inspector made a performance of shaking his head and scratching something grim onto his pink form. "I'll need to go inside," he grunted, voice like gravel. "But standing right here, I can already count 3 major code violations. We're probably looking at an immediate vacate order." Donovan wheeled toward me, his smile stretched so wide it seemed like it would split his face. "Catch that, corny and immediate vacate order. That means you're out. Right now. The bulldozers are coming exactly like I promised. You should have put your name on that deed transfer when you had the opening. Now you walk away with nothing. No land, no house." Lyra stood beside the car, both hands pressed over her face. She watched her childhood home being handed a death sentence, and she did not say one word to stop it. The inspector climbed the steps. He finally peeled off his sunglasses to study the doorframe up close. His eyes found mine. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I held his gaze flat and steady. "Owner's name!" he barked, pen poised above the paper. "Cornelius Drumright," I said. The inspector's hand stopped dead. He lifted his eyes from the clipboard. He squinted, leaning in, studying my face, the scar above my eye, the way I held my hands. The hard, swaggering energy drained right out of him, like water bleeding through a cracked bucket. His jaw loosened. "Mr. Drumright," he said it barely above a whisper. "Mr. Corny Drumright." "That's me," I replied, easy and level. The clipboard came down slowly. Something shifted in the inspector's face, pure recognition, and behind it, genuine respect. He actually took a half step back, nearly losing his footing. "I had no idea you were out here, sir." His voice was completely different now. Gone was the bully. In its place was a man addressing someone he'd always looked up to. "Haven't crossed paths since the groundbreaking over at Riverside Park. My kids are on that playground every single weekend." I gave a slow nod. "Glad to hear it, Darnell. I remember you well. You ran the drainage crew, brought the whole project in under budget." Donovan made a strangled sound of pure bewilderment. He shoved himself between his arms, cutting the air. "What is happening right now? Why are you talking to him like that? He is a code violator living in a shack. Just condemn the thing." Darnell turned on Donovan. The look he leveled at my son-in-law was withering, like he'd found something unpleasant stuck to the bottom of his boot. "Mr. Drumright, who exactly is this?" Darnell asked me. "Son-in-law," I said. "Fancies himself a structural engineer today." Darnell let out a short, sharp laugh. He fixed Donovan with a hard look. "And son, you have got absolutely no idea who you're standing in front of. Mr. Drumright didn't just put up this cabin. He built half the infrastructure in this county. He privately funded an entire new wing of the hospital. He bankrolled the library renovation. If he says this house is safe, then it is safe." Donovan's face went purple. "That is garbage. He's flat broke. He's unemployed. He paid you off. I will have your badge." Darnell stepped squarely into Donovan's space, a full head taller, 50 pounds heavier. "Excuse me, are you standing here accusing a city official of corruption? Because I can write you up right now for filing a false report. Using municipal resources to run a personal vendetta is a crime. You want me to get the sheriff on the line?" Donovan stumbled back, palms raised. "No, I thought..." "You thought wrong." Darnell cut him off. He ripped the pink citation sheet from the clipboard, crumpled it into a tight ball, and dropped it at Donovan's feet. "Get off this property, and if your name shows up on my dispatch log again, I will have you brought in for harassment." He turned back to me and tipped an imaginary hat. "My apologies for the disruption, Mr. Drumright. You have yourself a fine day." "Thank you, Darnell. I said. He climbed back into his truck and pulled away. Donovan stood there staring at that crumpled paper in the dirt, trembling. He had tried to aim the law at me like a weapon, and it had turned around in his hand. He looked my way, and for just a moment, I saw fear cross his face. Then the fear curdled into something darker, sharper. He pivoted slowly toward Lyra. She was staring at me wide-eyed, still processing every word the inspector had said. Hospital wings, libraries, county infrastructure. Donovan's voice went soft and poisonous. You hearing all this, Lyra? Lyra blinked. Hearing what? The inspector, Donovan said, moving toward her. Your father funded the hospital wing. He paid for the library renovation. You know what that runs millions of dollars, Lyra. Millions. He grabbed her by the shoulders and turned her to face me. He is not broke. He has been lying to your face, sitting on a mountain of money while we go under. He watched us get evicted. He watched me lose my job, and he sat here on top of all of it and did absolutely nothing. Lyra looked at me. Her expression changed. The confusion dissolved, replaced by something cold and deep. Dad. The word came out barely a whisper. Is it true? Do you actually have money? I stayed quiet. Answer me, she screamed. Do you have millions of dollars? Yes, I said. Lyra recoiled like I'd struck her across the face. You have millions, and you let us live like that. You let us struggle. I let you live your life, I said. No, you lied to me. Her voice cracked. You hid money from your own daughter. Donovan was right. You don't love us. You only love what's in your account. She took Donovan's hand. Take me home. I can't even look at him. Donovan threw a smirk over his shoulder as he walked her to the car. He hadn't managed to tear the house down, but he'd torn apart something that mattered far more. He'd turned my daughter against me, and as their car disappeared down the drive, I knew with absolute certainty this thing wasn't finished. It had just slid into a much dirtier phase. The dust hadn't even settled before I started getting ready for when they'd come back. And I knew they would. Greed is a powerful force, and now that they understood the force was 12 million strong, there was no staying away. Sure enough, the very next morning, the black SUV came roaring back up the driveway. This time, Lyra didn't wait for Donovan to open her door. She hit the porch at a full storm, face drawn and pale eyes raw from crying. Donovan trailed behind her, looking every bit the vulture orbiting something wounded. Why, Dad, Lyra's voice was ragged. Why did you let us go through all of that? You let us get evicted. You have millions, and you sat there while I sobbed over unpaid bills. While I lost sleep over the wedding budget. Do you hate me? Is that what this is? I sat in my chair, hands resting on my knees. I didn't hate her. I loved her enough to let her fall, which is the hardest love a parent can give. But she wasn't anywhere close to ready to hear it. She was in pain, and pain needs something to blame. I didn't do this to hurt you, Lyra, I said quietly. I did it to protect you. Protect me? She let out a laugh, bitter, broken. By lying to my face, by playing at being poor. How in the world is that protecting me? By keeping him away from the money, I said, and I pointed straight at Donovan. Donovan puffed his chest forward. Don't you dare pin this on me. You are the liar in this yard, Corny. You are the one perched on a fortune while your daughter can't make ends meet. You are a miser. A cold, selfish miser. I got to my feet. I reached under the chair and brought out a thick manila folder, something I'd put together over the past 6 months, alongside a private investigator. It had real weight to it. It hit the small wooden table between us with a thud. I'm not the one leaving her with nothing, Donovan, I said. You are. Donovan stared at the folder. What is that supposed to be, more lies? It's the truth, I said, which from where I'm standing you appear to be deeply allergic to. I flipped the folder open. Papers cascaded out across the table. Bank statements, credit card bills, casino receipts, hotel invoices. Lyra, take a look at this, I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. Lyra hesitated. She glanced over at Donovan, who had gone very still very suddenly. Don't touch it, babe, Donovan said fast. It's fabricated. He made it all up, just like he lied about being broke. Lyra looked at me, then at the papers. Curiosity beat caution. She reached for the top sheet, a credit card statement 3 months old. This is your card, Donovan, she said, her brow creasing. It shows $5,000 spent at the Platinum Lounge. She looked up. That's a strip club? You told me you were at a sales conference in Memphis. Donovan's face drained of color. That isn't mine. He stole my identity. Or he doctored it digitally. You know what people can do with technology. He's trying to set me up. I slid another paper across to her. That right there is a promissory note, I said, made out to a loan shark in Las Vegas. $200,000 Donovan, you are $200,000 deep in gambling debts. That is the real reason you want my land. That is why you need cash right now, not for a house, not for Lyra. To keep yourself breathing. Lyra turned through the pages, her hands trembling badly. There were receipts for jewelry she had never once laid eyes on. There were hotel bookings across town, on nights he claimed to be working late. There were wire transfers to offshore betting accounts that added up to more than her yearly salary. Oh my God, she breathed. A sapphire necklace, $4,000. Who is Candy? Donovan snatched the paper clean out of her hand. Nobody. That's a typo. It's a business expense. Lyra, listen to me. Look at this man. Look at him. He has despised me from the very start. He has hated me since day one. He went out and paid someone to manufacture all of this, just to drive a wedge between us. He wants to own you. He wants to buy you back with his millions, but first he has to eliminate me. He spun toward me, eyes burning. You are sick, Corny. You are a sick, twisted old man. You think throwing money around buys you your daughter? You think these lies are going to hold up? They aren't lies, I said. And deep down, you know that. Lyra looked at Donovan. She lifted a photograph from the pile and held it out. It showed Donovan stepping into a motel room alongside a woman who was very clearly not Lyra. The timestamp placed it 2 weeks before the wedding. Is this one doctored too, Donovan? She asked, her voice shaking. Donovan stared at the photo. There was no wriggling out of it. The cornered animal panic took hold. He couldn't deny it, so he lunged forward instead. He grabbed Lyra by both shoulders and shook her hard. Stop being stupid, he shouted. Can't you see exactly what he's pulling here? He is gaslighting you. He is the enemy in this story. He is the one hiding a secret fortune. I am your husband. You are supposed to be on my side. I don't know, Donovan, Lyra sobbed, twisting to pull free. There's so much here. The dates all line up. The money. Shut up! Donovan screamed. His hand came up, face contorted into a snarl of raw fury. He was about to hit her. He was going to strike my daughter just to silence her doubts. The whole air in that room shifted in an instant. I moved. Not like a man of 70. I moved the way I did back on the docks all those years ago. I caught Donovan's wrist mid-swing inches from Lyra's face. My grip was iron. I pressed my thumb deep into the soft tendons of his wrist. Donovan's breath caught his eyes snapping up to mine. Let go, he grunted. I rotated his arm, forcing him to step back, forcing him away from Lyra. I put myself squarely between them, a wall of gray wool and barely contained fury. If you ever, I said, voice dropped low, steady-laced with a promise that left no room for doubt. Raise your hand toward my daughter again, you will not walk out of this house on your own 2 feet. Do you understand me? I drove him backward with a shove. He stumbled, feet tangling, and crashed hard into the doorframe. He worked his wrist, staring at me with equal parts fear and hatred. He had miscalculated the old man once again. Lyra was crying, clutching those damning papers against her chest. She looked at Donovan as though she were seeing him clearly for the very first time. Get out, I told him. Off my property, now. Donovan straightened his jacket. He looked at Lyra, then at the papers, then back at me. He managed to scrape together a thin sliver of bravado, the mask edging back into place. Fine, he spat. I'm walking. But don't think for a second this is finished, old man. You think having a pile of money and some staged photos makes you the winner. You have no idea who you are up against. He leveled a finger at me. You are going to regret every bit of this. I will take it all. The land, the money, the girl. You will die rotting in this shack and I will spit on what's left of you. He turned to Lyra. Coming with me. Or are you siding with the liar? Lyra didn't move. She just stood there and wept. Have it your way, Donovan sneered. You'll come crawling back once you figure out he's just pulling your strings. He stormed out, hit the SUV door hard, and tore out of the driveway in a spray of dust, and left behind a silence that felt like an open wound. I turned to my daughter. She was shattered, but she was safe, for now. You are going to pay for this. Donovan shouted back through the window as the SUV disappeared. You are going to pay. Donovan Ashford was a man drowning in a hole he had dug entirely by himself. The $200,000 owed to loan sharks in Las Vegas wasn't just a line on a piece of paper anymore. It was a lit fuse. After I ran him off my property, he didn't check into a hotel. He had no way to. His credit cards were frozen solid, useless as stones. He parked his leased SUV, likely days from being repossessed, in the far corner of a 24-hour diner lot at the edge of town. He sat there in the dark engine, running the air conditioning, losing its battle against the sweat soaking through his shirt. He opened his laptop. Sleek silver company property he had never bothered to return after Mercer fired him at the wedding. He stared at the screen, his own reflection ghostly and hollow, staring back. He knew he had exactly one card left to play in the corporate arena. He knew where things were buried. Or more precisely, he knew where the money was buried. Drumright Logistics kept an internal database known as the Gold Ledger. It held our top 500 clients' private contact details, shipping routes, contract renewal windows. Data worth millions to the right competitor. If Donovan could pull that file and move it to our biggest rival across town, he could clear the loan sharks and still walk away with enough left over to come after me for the land. He cracked his knuckles. He connected to the diner's free Wi-Fi. He launched the secure VPN client. His hands were shaking so badly, he fumbled his password twice. On the third attempt, the connection bar went green. Access granted. He let out a long, slow breath. A crooked smile spread across his face. He thought we were careless. He assumed Mercer had forgotten to cut off his credentials in the chaos that followed the wedding. He moved through the server folders, eyes hunting, and there it was. Gold Ledger Master XLSX. He clicked download. Got you, he whispered to the empty car. Got every last one of you. The progress bar materialized on screen. 10%, 20%. He was already doing the math on the payout, already savoring the look on Mercer's face when the company bled out its biggest accounts, already dreaming of the lawyer he'd hire to come at me. 50%. At that exact moment, I was out on the porch of my cabin, watching fireflies drift through the evening dark. A mug of black coffee sat on the railing beside me, a thread of steam curling into the cool air. The stillness of the woods was total, a world away from the storm churning through Donovan's life. Then I felt a vibration in the pocket of my work trousers. Not a smartphone buzz. A slow, deliberate pulse from my old brick phone. I drew it out. The small monochrome screen showed a single line of text. Intrusion detected. User ID Ashford. I didn't panic. I didn't scramble for a computer. I took a sip of my coffee. Donovan believed he had stumbled onto a security gap. A back door left carelessly open. What he had no way of knowing was that I had built that back door myself 20 years prior. When I laid out the architecture for the company's entire digital infrastructure, I planted a honeypot inside it, a trap designed precisely for disgruntled former employees who thought they could torch the place on their way out the door. The file making its way onto his machine was not the client list. It was a disguised executable dressed up to look like a spreadsheet, a program I had named the Guillotine. I looked down at the phone. It offered me two choices: block the access or execute the countermeasure. I thought about the way he spoke to my daughter. I thought about the vase he smashed. I thought about the contempt he showed toward everyone who had built this company from nothing. I pressed option 2, execute. Out in the diner parking lot, Donovan's laptop screen flickered. The download bar climbed to 99% and locked up cold. "Come on," he hissed, hammering the enter key. "Come on, you useless piece of junk." The download didn't budge. Instead, the screen blazed a furious, deep crimson. A text box materialized dead center, black letters punched against the red. Unauthorized access detected. Countermeasures initiated. "Smile, you are on camera." Donovan went rigid. The small green light beside the webcam blinked on. Before he could throw a hand over it, the camera fired off a rapid series of high-definition shots of his face, capturing the precise moment his arrogance curdled into terror. Then the machine went haywire. The cooling fan screamed up to full speed, a high-pitched whine, like a jet engine winding for takeoff. The hard drive began overwriting itself, shredding every file Donovan had ever saved on it. Personal emails, banking credentials, contacts, the manufactured evidence for his bogus lawsuit against me, all of it devoured by code I had written 20 years before. "No," Donovan screamed. He tried to force the laptop shut, but the screen refused to go dark. He held the power button down, and the machine ignored him entirely. The speakers erupted in a loud, oscillating wail that turned every head at the diner entrance. Donovan lost his nerve. He flung the laptop onto the passenger seat like it was on fire. The screen finally went black, but the damage was complete. The device was a useless brick, and the signal had already flown. 5 minutes later, Donovan's phone buzzed. An email notification. He checked it, hands shaking. It was from the legal department of Drumright Logistics. Subject: notice of legal action. Mr. Ashford, we have recorded a verified attempt of corporate espionage originating from your personal device. We have photographic evidence and IP logs confirming your identity. We are filing immediate charges with the FBI for violation of the Economic Espionage Act. We are also pursuing civil damages of $10 million for attempted theft of trade secrets. Do not leave the jurisdiction. Donovan dropped the phone. He let out a long guttural howl of pure rage and terror. He drove his fist into the steering wheel, tears of fury running down his face. He was boxed in. He had tried to steal his way clear of debt and had only managed to sink himself into a hole he couldn't see the bottom of. He stared at the dark interior of that car. He was flat broke. He was staring down federal prison. He had enemies closing in from every direction, the loan sharks, the company me. He needed a way out. He needed something nuclear. A new, darker idea began to take shape behind his eyes. He couldn't outmaneuver me with money. He couldn't outmaneuver me with the law. He couldn't outmaneuver me in business. But there was one angle left, one vulnerability he believed I had: my age. He picked the phone back up. He dialed Lyra's number. His voice shifted on the spot from the snarl of a trapped animal to the smooth, practiced tone of a worried husband. "Lyra, baby, you have to listen to me," he said, voice thick with manufactured emotion. "I just tried to log into my old work email to pull some contacts for job leads, and your father shut me out. He hacked into my computer remotely. He's destroying my device from a distance." He let that hang a moment, letting the lie take root. "Honey, I am genuinely scared for him. This is not normal. The paranoia, the aggression sitting on millions while living like this. I talked to a specialist I know. These are textbook signs of advanced dementia. He is a danger to himself, and he is a danger to the people around him." He drew a long breath, steadying himself for the killing blow. "We can't leave him out there like this, Lyra. We have to step in for his own sake. We need to get him proper help. We need to have him committed. And once we hold legal guardianship, he can't keep coming after us." He ended the call and started the car. A cold, satisfied smile settled on his face. If he couldn't steal my money, he would simply strip away my freedom. He would lock the old man up and pocket the keys. The nursing home play. His final hand. The seed of doubt Donovan had planted in my daughter's mind grew into a poisonous tree within hours. He gave her no time to think clearly. He gave her no space to come to me and ask for the truth. He penned her into their cramped temporary apartment and buried her in fear. I wasn't there to defend myself, but I know word for word what he said, because Lyra told me herself later through tears of shame. He paced the room, waving his dead laptop like a prop in a bad horror film. He told her I hadn't simply blocked his computer access. He told her I'd been raving. He claimed I had called him screaming about spies and assassins closing in. He told her the millions I claimed to have were nothing but a symptom of severe delusion, the kind of fantasy common in seniors losing their grip on reality. He leaned in close and delivered his darkest lie yet. He told her I was stockpiling kerosene. He said I had threatened to burn the cabin to the ground to keep the government away from my imaginary fortune. "Do you want that call, Lyra?" he asked, her voice quivering with counterfeit concern. "Do you want the sheriff ringing you at 3:00 in the morning to tell you your father burned to death? Because we didn't move in time. We are the only ones who can help him now. He is sick, baby. He is so far gone he doesn't even know who he is anymore. That is what's behind the attack on me. That is what's behind all of it. The humiliation, it is the disease." Lyra broke. She was exhausted, she was broke, and she was terrified. She loved me, and Donovan took that love and turned it into a weapon pointed straight at me. She agreed to sign the papers. She agreed to the emergency involuntary commitment. It came at 2:00 in the morning. I was awake in the dark, watching the security feeds on my old brick phone. I caught the headlights slicing through the trees long before they reached the cabin. Not a police car, not a standard ambulance. An unmarked white van with tinted windows. Donovan hadn't called county services. He had hired a private patient transport company, the kind that doesn't ask questions as long as the check clears. I stood and pulled on my jacket. I knew there was no fighting them off physically. If I reached for a gun or threw a punch, I would only be handing Donovan the narrative he needed that I was violent, unstable, dangerous. I had to play this differently. I opened my safe and took out a small silver USB drive I had prepared days earlier, ready for exactly this kind of moment. I slipped it into my palm and tucked it up into my sleeve. The front door crashed open. No knock, no warning. Two men in blue scrubs stepped inside the size of linebackers. Faces blank and businesslike. Donovan followed them in clipboard in hand. Lyra brought up the rear face buried in her palm, sobbing quietly. "Mr. Drumright," the first orderly said, moving toward me, "we're here to bring you somewhere safe." I didn't move. I looked straight at Donovan. "You are a coward, Donovan. You can't beat me in a fair fight, so you have to cage me instead." Donovan didn't look at me. He turned to Lyra and extended the clipboard and pen. "Sign it, honey. The doctor is ready. We have to do this now before he does something to hurt himself." Lyra looked at me. Her eyes were flooded with terror and grief. "Daddy, please. This is for your own good. You are not well. We just want to help you." "I am perfectly sound, Lyra," I said, steady and quiet. "And he is lying to you." "You see that?" Donovan shouted, spinning toward the orderlies and pointing at me. "Paranoid. He believes everyone is conspiring against him. Sign the paper, Lyra. Right now." Lyra's hand shook as she put her name to the involuntary commitment order. The scratch of the band against the paper sounded like a verdict. The moment the ink dried, the orderlies moved. They didn't invite me to walk. They took hold of my arms. I planted my feet. "I can walk on my own," I said. "He's resisting." Donovan snapped. "Sedate him." One of the men produced a syringe from his pocket already loaded. No hesitation. He drove it into my shoulder through the wool of my jacket. I felt the sting, then the cold chemical tide rising through my blood. That wasn't necessary. I gritted my legs going to lead beneath me. Donovan smiled, the smile of a man who believed he had finally won. He stepped close as the drug dragged me down toward darkness. "This is better for everyone, Corny." He murmured low enough that only I could catch it. "You get a nice padded room. I get the power of attorney. What you are about to hear is the moment everything shifts when a man who thought he was still holding every card realizes the deck was never in his hands to begin with. Before we get there, tell me this. If someone you trusted had been quietly working to destroy you, would you confront them the moment you knew? Or would you wait and let them finish digging their own grave? I get the land, I get the money, and Lyra gets to believe she saved her daddy. Everybody comes out ahead. My vision smeared. The room canted sideways. The orderlies began hauling me toward the door, my feet dragged across the floorboards. I fought the darkness pressing in from all sides. I had one thing left to do, one final move before I vanished into the system. Lyra was standing at the doorframe, crying, unable to meet my eyes. I went limp, making myself dead weight, forcing the orderlies to shift their grip. It brought me within inches of her. I reached out with my right hand, the one hiding the USB drive. I snagged the edge of her jacket. She flinched and looked down. She expected rage. She expected me to plead. I gave her neither. I used the last scrap of coordination I had left to ease the silver drive into her open pocket. My fingertips grazed her hand. She went, still feeling the cold, hard object slide in. I looked up at her. My tongue felt like wool. The world was dissolving into gray, but I forced my eyes to find hers one last time. "Don't cry." I said the words coming out thick and slow. "Watch it. Watch what I put in your pocket. Then you can cry." Lyra's brow creased, her hand moving to her pocket. She felt the drive. She looked at me, confusion tangled up with grief. "Get him out of here," Donovan snapped. The orderlies dragged me through the door and out into the night. They loaded me into the back of the van and strapped me to a gurney. The last image I had before the heavy metal door swung shut was Donovan sliding his arm around Lyra's shoulders, comforting her for the crime he had just maneuvered her into committing. The engine turned over. The van rolled forward. I let my eyes close and let the sedative take me under. I was heading to a prison, but I had left the key behind in the right hands. Donovan thought he had buried me. What he didn't see was that he had just passed the shovel to the only person capable of digging me back out. I came to with the smell of ammonia and stale urine hitting me first. My head felt packed with wet cotton, the sedative still clinging to every corner of my mind. I tried to push myself upright, but my muscles wouldn't follow orders. I blinked, fighting to clear my vision. The room was barely bigger than a closet, institutional green paint peeling off the walls in curling strips. A single metal cot bolted to the floor, a mattress not much thicker than a paperback, and a lidless toilet in the corner. No windows. The only light was a fluorescent tube buzzing behind a wire cage on the ceiling. This was not a hospital. It was not a care facility. It was a warehouse for people families wanted to stop thinking about. A place where inconvenient elders got filed away and forgotten. I worked myself to the edge of the cot and set my feet on the cold linoleum. I was not afraid. Fear belongs to the unknown, and I knew exactly where I was and precisely how I had gotten here. I had allowed this. It was the only way to put the evidence into the only hands that could do anything with it. Miles away in the cabin, Donovan had tried so hard to condemn my daughter, sat staring at the small silver object resting in her palm. The house was quiet. Donovan had dropped her off and left immediately to meet with his lawyer, eager to push through the paperwork that would hand him power of attorney over my estate. He had left Lyra alone with her guilt. She sat on the sofa where I used to read the newspaper. She turned the USB drive over in her fingers. Her hands were trembling. She kept hearing my last words. "Watch it, then you can cry." She reached for her laptop, an old machine one I had bought her for college years ago. She pressed the drive into the side port. A folder opened on the screen containing a single video file. The title was simply "The Truth." She hesitated. Her heart was slamming hard against her ribs. Part of her wanted to yank the drive out and feed it to the fireplace. Part of her wanted to hold on to the story that Donovan was her protector and I was the danger. But the root of doubt I had planted ran deep. She moved the cursor over the file and clicked play. The video opened. The camera angle was high and wide, a hidden lens. It was the inside of Donovan's SUV. The timestamp showed 3 days ago, the afternoon he had shown up to threaten me with the lawsuit. Lyra leaned forward. On the screen, Donovan was behind the wheel. He wasn't alone. In the passenger seat sat a woman. Lyra didn't recognize, young blonde, laughing easily, her hand resting with easy familiarity on Donovan's thigh. "So, he really has millions?" the woman asked, her voice thin through the laptop speakers. "12 million in land alone." Donovan answered, a smug grin spread wide across his face. "Plus, whatever cash he's been sitting on. The old fool has been planted on top of a gold mine while I've been dodging calls from collectors." "And what about the wife?" the woman pressed. "The daughter? Does she have any idea?" Lyra stopped breathing. "She does now," Donovan laughed. "But she is stupid. She is so desperate to be loved, she'll swallow anything I feed her. I told her the old man has lost his mind and she lapped it right up. She is weak just like her father, pathetic and soft." The woman in the video giggled. "So what happens once you get the money?" Donovan took one hand off the wheel and squeezed her leg. "Once I lock in the power of attorney and move that land, Lyra is out. I'll hand her a few $1,000s to keep her quiet and file for divorce. She's exhausting anyway, always crying, always going on about her daddy. I'm finished with her. We take the money, buy somewhere in Miami, and live like we own the world." Lyra gasped. The air emptied right out of her. She watched the Donovan on that screen lean across and kiss the woman, long and unhurried, while driving the car her father had paid for. "He'll be in a nursing home before the week's out," Donovan bragged to his mistress. "And once he's locked up and medicated, not a soul will listen to a word he says. He'll rot in there, while we burn through every dollar he ever saved." Lyra slammed the laptop shut. She couldn't take another second of it. She couldn't get air into her lungs. The sound that tore out of her wasn't a cry, it was something rawer than that something that came from the floor of her chest. It wasn't just heartbreak, it was her entire world cracking apart at every seam. I had been right. I had been right about all of it. The gambling debts, the cheating, the theft attempt. She had turned her back on the only man who had ever loved her without condition, for a man who sat in his car and called her stupid and weak to another woman's face. She curled up on the sofa, shaking with sobs. She felt filthy. She felt used down to the bone. And then it hit her with a nausea she would never forget, that she had put her name on papers to imprison her own father on the word of a predator. The front door opened. Lyra froze. She dragged her sleeve across her eyes, but it was already too late. Donovan walked in. He was whistling, a bottle of champagne in one hand, a stack of legal documents in the other. He had the look of a man who had just cashed the winning ticket. "Honey, I'm home," he called out bright and easy. "And you are not going to believe it. The lawyer says we can push the property transfer through early. We could be rich by Friday." He stopped when he saw her. He took in the red swollen eyes. He saw the open laptop on the coffee table. He saw the silver USB drive jutting out of the port. The whistling stopped. The champagne bottle drifted slowly down to his side. The room went electric. "What were you watching, Lyra?" He asked, his voice dropping into something low and dangerous. Lyra got to her feet. Her legs were unsteady, but she stood. She looked at him, and for the first time she saw clearly what had been standing in front of her all along. Not a husband, a monster. "You are cheating on me," she said barely above a whisper. Donovan blinked. "Who told you that, your crazy father? I watched it myself." She screamed, jabbing a finger at the screen. "I saw you with her. I heard every word. You called me stupid. You said you were going to throw me out the moment you had the money. You are stealing my father's land." Donovan looked at the laptop. He didn't reach for a denial. He didn't even try to spin a story. He let the champagne bottle go. It didn't shatter, it just rolled across the rug with a hollow thud. He let the papers go. He came forward fast. He seized the laptop in both hands and hauled it over his head. With a roar of pure fury, he drove it down onto the corner of the heavy wooden table. The screen exploded. Shards of plastic and glass sprayed across the room. He brought it down again and again until nothing was left but a tangle of twisted metal and bare wire. He wrenched the USB drive from the port and crushed it under his heel, grinding it into the floorboards. He stood there panting over the wreckage. "Now you haven't seen a thing. It's your word against mine. And who is going to believe a hysterical woman whose father is locked in a psych ward? Supple, bien de bussers besid die." "You are out of your mind," Lyra cried, retreating toward the kitchen. "I'm calling the police. I'm getting my father out of there." Donovan closed the distance faster than she anticipated. He seized her arm and spun her around. He shoved her hard toward the bedroom. "You aren't calling a soul," he snarled. "You are going to stay right in that room and keep your mouth shut until the sale is final. If you try to walk out that door, if you try to reach anyone, I will tell the doctors. You have lost it just as bad as your old man. I will have you committed right alongside him." He threw her into the bedroom and slammed the door. Lyra heard the lock snap shut. She beat on the wood and screamed at him to let her out, but he just laughed from the other side. "Oh, sit tight, wifey," he shouted through the door. "We are almost at the finish line." Back in my cell, the heavy steel door swung open. A large orderly stepped inside, a cordless phone in his hand. He looked at me with hollow, practiced eyes. "Call for you." He grunted. He pressed the phone to my ear. My arms were still too slow and clumsy to take it. "Hello?" I rasped my throat bone dry. "Hello, Corny." Donovan's voice came through bright and cheerful. "How's the vacation treating you? The food any good?" "You won't get away with this, Donovan," I said. "I already have," he replied. "I'm at the cabin. I have the deed and I have Lyra. She found your little movie, by the way. She wasn't a fan, but don't worry, I handled it. She's locked in her room for her own safety. Same as you." My hand tightened into a fist. "If you lay a hand on her, what exactly are you going to do?" "Corny," he cut in, "you're sealed in a box. You have no power. You are nothing. I have the land, I have the girl, and you are going to rot in there until you're done. Goodbye, old man." The line went dead. The orderly retrieved the phone and walked out the lock, engaging behind him with a heavy final clank. I sat in the silence of my cell. Donovan thought the game was over. He thought he'd won the last hand. He didn't understand that I wasn't trapped in there with him. He was trapped out there with me. I looked at the door handle, a simple pin tumbler lock. I reached into the hem of my trousers and drew out a thin, stiff piece of wire I had tucked away days earlier. It was time to check out. I held still until the orderly's heavy footsteps faded down the hallway. Then I moved. The wire was a plain thing, a sliver of metal I'd scavenged in advance, knowing a moment like this would come. But in the hands of a man who had spent 40 years pulling engines apart and unjamming conveyor belts, it was as good as a master key. I crouched at the door. Standard commercial-grade deadbolt built to resist force, but wide open to patience and feel. I slid the wire in and searched for the tumblers. I closed my eyes. Sight was useless here. What I needed was touch. I mapped the mechanism in my mind, the springs, the pins, the sequence. 1 click, 2 clicks. I pressed a gentle torque with my thumb. The third pin dragged stiff and stubborn, but I worked it upward slowly, carefully. The cylinder turned with a soft metallic groan that sounded exactly like freedom. I eased the door open an inch. The hallway stretched out dim and gray, lit by flickering fluorescent tubes, humming with years of neglect. The orderly sat at his station about 20 feet off, back toward me, feet propped on the desk, scrolling his phone. He was a big man, a wall of muscle and weight, the kind brought in for intimidation, not care. I slipped out into the corridor, my socks making no sound on the cold linoleum. I didn't run. Running draws eyes. I moved with a deliberate predatory stillness, closing the gap before the air in the room had any reason to change. He sensed something at the last moment. He spun his chair, dropping the phone. "Hey!" he barked already, pushing to his feet. "Back in your room, old man." His hand went for the taser on his hip. He was slow about it, confident. He looked at gray hair and lined skin and assumed weakness. He didn't see the man who had built something from nothing with his bare hands. He didn't see the man who had loaded cargo ships in freezing rain until his muscles turned to steel cable. I didn't break stride. I stepped inside his reach as he lunged. He grabbed for my throat. I knocked his arm aside and drove my fist into his solar plexus. Not a wide swing, a short, compact, piston-like strike carrying 70 years of weight and righteous fury. The air left him in a wet, collapsing wheeze. He bent double. I didn't give him a second to recover. I got a hand on the back of his neck and the other on his belt and used his own folding momentum to put him face first into the desk. His forehead met the laminate with a sickening crack. He crumpled to the floor, moaning, hands cupped over his face. "Stay down." I said, my breathing calm and level. I unclipped his keys from his belt. I didn't look back. I moved down the corridor, my stride opening up. I passed other rooms and heard the soft, hopeless sounds coming through the doors, and I made myself a quiet promise to dismantle this place through every legal means available once this was finished. At the end of the hall stood a heavy oak door marked Administration. I didn't knock. I used the orderly's keys, threw the door open, and walked in. The office was plush, a world away from the cells out back. Oriental rugs, walnut furniture, the smell of expensive pipe tobacco. Behind the desk sat the director, a man named Dr. Tolbert. He was counting a stack of cash, almost certainly the bribe money Donovan had handed him. He lurched to his feet, sending bills scattering across the desktop. "Who are you?" he demanded, eyes gone wide. "How did you get out?" "As security." I pulled the door shut behind me and locked it. "Sit down," I said. Dr. Tolbert's gaze moved to the phone on the desk. "Don't even think about reaching for that," I said, crossing toward him. "By the time you dial the first number, I will be over this desk, and unlike your orderly out there, I won't be going easy." He dropped back into his chair, the color draining from his face. "Look, Mr. Drumright, we can reach an understanding here. Your son-in-law paid for a premium care package. We were simply following the terms." "He didn't pay for anything," I said, planting both hands on the desk and leaning across it. "He used stolen money, but that isn't even your biggest problem right now. Your biggest problem is that you didn't do any due diligence. You didn't bother to find out who I was." "I know who you are," Dr. Tolbert stammered. "You are Cornelius Drumright, a retired mechanic with dementia." I reached into my pocket and set my old brick phone on the desk beside his pile of dirty cash. "Turn around and look at the wall behind you," I said. Dr. Tolbert turned. There, among the diplomas and plaques, hung a large bronze commemorative panel listing the founding donors of the facility. "Read the name at the top," I said. Dr. Tolbert squinted. "The Odette Drumright Foundation." "Odette Drumright was my wife," I said, my voice dropping to a low, room-filling quiet. "This facility exists because I wrote a check for $3 million 10 years ago so that elderly people would be treated with dignity. I own the land this building stands on. I sit on the board of the trust that signs your paycheck." Dr. Tolbert turned back to face me. His mouth worked silently, opening and closing, without producing a sound. The blood left his face so fast, he looked like a man watching his own execution. He stared at my old suit, then at my face, and the full weight of what he had done landed on him all at once. He had imprisoned his own benefactor. He had taken a bribe to torment the man who owned the ground beneath his feet. "Oh my God," he whispered. "Mr. Drumright, sir, I had no idea. The paperwork said—" "The paperwork was forged," I cut him off. "And you are finished. You are going to prison, doctor, for kidnapping, for fraud, for elder abuse. And I will personally make certain you never practice medicine again." I picked up his desk phone. I dialed the number from memory. "Ms. Albrecht," I said when the line picked up. "It is time. Execute the protocol and call the sheriff. I am at the nursing home." I looked over at Dr. Tolbert. He was shaking, tears gathering in his eyes. "Sir, please," he managed. "I have a family." "So do I said, my voice like ice. "And my family is sitting hostage right now because you handed that psychopath the keys. Get up!" I marched him out of the office and across the front lobby. The receptionist gaped as I shoved the director through the automatic glass doors. We walked out into the cool night air. What waited outside was a display of sheer organized power. The gravel drive was packed with vehicles, but not police cruisers. Not yet. 3 black Rolls-Royce Phantoms sat idling their engines, producing a low, menacing rumble. The Drumright Logistics emblem was discreetly pressed into the doors. Standing at the lead car was Ms. Albrecht, my chief legal counsel, a woman who could gut a man's career with a single contract clause. Behind her stood 6 men in dark suits. They weren't just drivers. They were my personal security detail, recruited straight from special forces units, men who had protected my shipments in active war zones. Ms. Albrecht moved forward. She didn't spare Tolbert a glance. Her eyes went straight to me. "Mr. Drumright," she said, presenting me with a fresh tablet and a clean jacket. "The sheriff is 5 minutes out. The warrants are ready." "Good," I said. I turned to Tolbert, who was gaping at the row of cars, his jaw somewhere around his chest. "Wait here for the police," I told him. "If you so much as shift your weight, my associates will handle you. And they have considerably less patience than I do." I walked to the lead Rolls-Royce. The driver, a man named Darnell, who had been at my side for 15 years, pulled open the rear door. "Where to, sir?" Darnell asked. I looked out toward the horizon, toward the tree line, where my cabin sat, where my daughter was trapped, where Donovan was toasting a victory he'd never actually won. I straightened my new jacket. The strength was flowing back into my body. The frail old man was gone. The CEO had returned. "Take me home, Darnell," I said, settling into the leather interior. "We've got trash to take out." Inside the cabin, the air hung heavy with stale sweat and the promise of violence. Donovan Ashford had moved well past desperate. He'd crossed into deranged. He prowled the small living room, a carving knife clutched in his sweating fist. He'd ripped the phone cord clean out of the wall. He'd bolted the front door. He'd turned the very sanctuary I built to protect my daughter into her prison. Lyra sat at the wooden dining table, shaking so hard the chair ticked against the floorboards. The quitclaim deed was spread before her, smooth, flat, but soaked through with her tears. Donovan brought his hand crashing down on the table, making her lurch in her seat. "Sign it!" he shrieked, his voice fracturing under the weight of his hysteria. "Sign his name? You hold his power of attorney now. You can do it for him. Do it." "I can't." Lyra wept, her hands pressed over her face. "It's illegal. He never agreed to any of this. You had him committed." "He is gone!" Donovan roared, leaning over her. "He is in a hole. He is never coming out." "He is rotting in that cell, and he will die there. We are all that's left. We need that money. The sharks are circling Lyra. Do you hear me? They will break my legs. They will come after you too." He seized a fistful of her hair and wrenched her head back, forcing her eyes up to meet his. He brought the knife up, pressing the cold blade against the soft skin of her throat. A single drop of blood rose beneath the edge. "And you sign the paper?" He hissed, his eyes wide and shot through with red. "Sign it, or I swear to God I'll cut you. I have nothing left to lose. I will kill you and tell the police your lunatic father escaped and did it. They'll believe me. Everyone always believes me." Lyra whimpered and reached for the pen with a trembling hand. She was going to do it. She was going to sign away her entire inheritance just to survive. The pen touched the paper. At that exact instant, the world outside the cabin erupted in light. High-intensity beams sliced through the thin curtains and flooded the room with a blinding white blaze. The gravel driveway groaned under the roll of heavy, precision-engineered tires. It wasn't a single car. It was a fleet. Donovan froze, the knife still at Lyra's throat. "Who is that?" he breathed, squinting hard against the glare. "Is that the police?" He dragged Lyra up out of the chair, pulling her in front of him, as a human shield, angling them both toward the door. "Don't move," he warned her. "They come through that door, you bleed." The front door didn't open. It ceased to exist. A single thunderous impact shook the cabin to its foundation as the lock, the frame, and the wood all blew inward at once. Splinters scattered through the air like shrapnel. 2 figures in tactical black poured into the room, moving with a speed and precision that the eye could barely register. They weren't police. They were my personal extraction team men, who had cleared rooms in combat before they ever pulled on a suit for Drumright Logistics. Donovan tried to yell, tried to tighten his grip on the knife, but he was up against gravity and trained professionals. The first guard cracked Donovan's wrist with a baton, a sickening snap ringing out through the room. The knife dropped to the floor. The second guard swept his legs and drove him face first into the hardwood. Lyra screamed and threw herself backwards, slamming into the wall. "Stay down!" The guard barked, pressing a knee into the center of Donovan's back. Donovan howled in pain and bewilderment. "Who are you people? What is happening?" Then the room went still. The dust from the shattered door drifted and settled. The guards stepped apart, opening a path. I walked through the broken doorway. I was no longer wearing the moth-eaten wool jacket or the stained work trousers. I had on a bespoke Italian suit, charcoal gray cut to absolute perfection. My shoes carried a mirror polish. A silk tie was knotted precisely at my throat. I didn't move with any old man's stoop. I moved with the straight, commanding posture of a man who has directed armies. I carried a gold-handled cane, not for balance, but as an emblem of authority. I stepped into the light of the living room. I looked at the shattered vase. I looked at my terrified daughter. I looked at the man pinned to the floor like an insect. "Hello, Donovan," I said. My voice was calm, deep, and settled with absolute certainty. Donovan twisted his head, straining to see me. His eyes went wide until they were nearly perfectly round. He blinked, trying to match the image of the ragged old man he'd thrown into a van, with the figure towering over him now. "Corny!" he gasped. "How you were in the home? You are broke." I walked toward him. Each step of my expensive shoes on the wood rang out clean and deliberate. I stopped inches from his face. I looked down at him with cold, total indifference. "I am not corny," I said. "Corny was a Rolla test, and you failed it." I signaled to the guards. They hauled Donovan up to his knees and held him there, forcing him to look at me. He was shaking sweat and snot streaking his face. He looked at the suit. He looked at the guards. He looked at the line of Rolls Royces visible through the wreckage of the door. "Who are you?" Donovan screamed, his mind buckling under the weight of the reality unfolding before him. "You are a nobody. You are an unemployed loser." I leaned in close. I wanted him to feel every word. "I am the man who signs the checks of the CEO who fired you," I said. "I am the majority shareholder of the bank that holds your mortgage. I am the owner of the land you are kneeling on. And at this moment, I am the man who owns your future." Donovan shook his head. No, that's impossible. You are just a mechanic." "I was a mechanic 40 years ago," I said. "Now I am Drumright Logistics. And you, Donovan, are a trespasser. You are a kidnapper. You are a fraud." I looked at Lyra. She was staring at me, mouth open, the tears drying on her face. She took in the suit. She took in the power, and for the first time she was seeing her father not as someone who had been broken, but as a force of nature. "Daddy," she whispered. I turned back to Donovan. "You wanted my money," I said. "You wanted my power. Well, here it stands. This is what power actually looks like, son. It doesn't look like terrorizing a woman with a knife. It looks like dismantling a man's entire existence without ever raising your voice." I nodded to Ms. Albrecht, who stepped into the room with a tablet in hand. "Show him," I said. She held the screen directly in front of Donovan's face. It showed a live feed of his secret warehouse being raided by the FBI. It showed his bank accounts frozen and seized. It showed his face splashed across a breaking news alert for corporate espionage. "You are finished, Donovan," I said. "You have no money. You have no job. You have no wife. And as of this moment, you have no freedom. Take him out of my house." I commanded the guards, "And make sure he hits every step on the way down." As they hauled him out screaming, I turned to face my daughter. I held out my hand. She looked at it, then at me. Then she surged forward and buried her face against my chest, sobbing hard. I held her close, the expensive fabric of my suit taking in her tears. The war was finished, but the cleanup was only getting started. Donovan Ashford was a cockroach. You could stomp him, you could spray him, but he'd always find a way to skitter back into the dark. I thought the FBI raid on his digital life would close the book on him, but I had underestimated the particular blindness of a mother's love. His parents, decent, ordinary people who had no idea their son had become a monster, mortgaged their retirement home to post his bail. He was out within 48 hours. And instead of running, instead of going to ground, he did the only thing a narcissist ever knows how to do. He chased the spotlight. I switched on the television in my living room. Every channel was carrying the same breaking news alert. And there he was. Donovan sat in a studio chair, gaunt and bruised, wearing a borrowed suit that didn't quite fit. He was crying. It was an impressive performance. "My father-in-law is not who he claims to be," Donovan sobbed to the interviewer, a woman known for her sympathy pieces. "He calls himself a businessman, but he's a criminal mastermind. He has ties to the underworld. He kidnapped my wife. He's holding her right now in that cabin. Those men in black suits aren't security. They are his hit squad." The interviewer leaned forward, her face arranged into concern. "And the charges against you, Donovan, the corporate espionage?" "Fabricated," Donovan insisted, dabbing at a tear. "He broke into my computer. He planted it all. He has billions of dollars. He can purchase the police. He can purchase the judges. I am just an ordinary man who tried to stand by his wife, and now he is trying to grind me into nothing. Please, if anyone out there is listening, save Lyra. Save my wife." The public swallowed every word. Social media lit up like a fuse. Within an hour, hashtags were trending. "Justice for Donovan," "Free Lyra." A crowd started forming at the gate of my property. People showed up with signs. They shouted threats. They called me a monster. They weren't seeing a father who had protected his daughter. They were seeing a rich villain crushing a poor man. I switched off the TV. I looked at Lyra. She was sitting in the corner, slowly shaking her head. "He is good," she whispered. "He is so good at lying. He is desperate," I said, "and desperation makes men sloppy." I picked up my phone. "Ms. Albrecht," I said, "get the stage set up. We are going live in 30 minutes. I walked out onto the porch. The crowd at the gate had grown larger. News vans were rolling and satellite dishes rising like hungry necks extended toward the sky. I didn't hide. I didn't pull back. I signaled to my security team. They swung the main gate open. "Let them in," I said. The reporters surged up the driveway, cameras live, microphones thrust forward. They were braced for a standoff. They expected a fortress. What they found instead was a 70-year-old man standing on the porch of a modest cabin, holding his daughter's hand. Behind me, my team had erected a large LED screen. It looked jarring against the worn wood of the cabin, a monolith of technology dropped into the wilderness. "Mr. Drumright," a reporter shouted, "is it true you're holding your daughter against her will?" I didn't answer. I simply pointed to the screen. The image came to life. This was not pre-recorded footage. It was a live feed, the timestamp in the corner, ticking off the seconds in real time. The location was a nondescript warehouse in the industrial district, a property Donovan had leased under a shell company 3 years ago. Everyone watched. The reporters went quiet. On the screen, heavily armed federal agents were cutting through a metal door with a blowtorch. Sparks rained down. The door collapsed inward with a crash. The agents pushed inside their flashlights, carving through the darkness. The camera tracked with them. It panned across row after row of metal shelving, but there were no legitimate goods on those shelves. There were stacks of counterfeit currency hanging to dry on racks. There were bags of white powder that tested positive for synthetic opioids. There were crates of stolen electronics. I stepped up to the microphone my team had positioned on the stairs. "Donovan Ashford claims I am a criminal," I said, my voice carrying across the entire yard. "He claims I planted evidence," I continued. "But what you are watching right now is a federal raid on a warehouse leased in his name, funded by his accounts and opened with his biometric key." The screen divided. On one side was the raid, on the other, a document. "This is the lease agreement I went on, signed by Donovan Ashford. And this is the ledger recovered from his encrypted cloud server. It documents every transaction, every drug deal, every laundered dollar. He was not selling logistics services. He was running contraband through my company's shipping containers." Lyra moved up beside me. She faced the cameras directly. Her voice trembled, but it was clear. "My husband is not a victim," she said. "He is a predator, and my father did not kidnap me. He saved me." Miles away in the living room of his parents' modest home, Donovan Ashford sat frozen. The remote slipped from his fingers and hit the floor. He stared at the screen. He watched the raid. He watched his entire house of cards catch fire and burn to ash in high definition. He saw the reporters pivot to their cameras, their faces shifting from sympathy. He heard the anchor cut into the broadcast. "Breaking news," the anchor said. "The FBI has just issued a nationwide manhunt for Donovan Ashford. He is considered armed and dangerous. If you see this man, do not approach. Call 911 immediately." Donovan lurched backward, toppling his mother's coffee table. His parents stared at him, a slow horror spreading across their faces. They had signed over their home for a drug dealer. "I have to go," Donovan stammered. "I need to leave now." He grabbed his car keys and bolted out the back door. He threw himself into his mother's old sedan. He turned the key. The engine coughed and sputtered. He glanced back at the house. He could hear sirens in the distance drawing closer. They were coming, not just the police either. The loan sharks would see this broadcast too. Everyone was converging on him at once. He floored at tires, shrieking out of the driveway, a man sprinting a race he had already lost before the gun fired. He was no longer a husband. He was no longer anyone's victim. He was prey. Donovan Ashford drove his mother's old sedan like a man whose mind had snapped. He blew 3 red lights and clipped a parked delivery truck without slowing once. Sirens wailed somewhere behind him, a steady reminder that his world had compressed to the dimensions of a prison cell. His phone sat in the cup holder, buzzing with calls from numbers he didn't know. Probably the press, probably law enforcement, probably the men whose money he owed. He needed a way out. He needed cash. He needed a plane ticket out of the country. His mind burned through his list of contacts, but they had all gone dark on him. His friends had blocked his number. His parents were wiped out because of his bail. There was only one person remaining, one person who might still help him, not out of loyalty, but out of fear. He dialed Mercer. The line rang once, twice. Donovan's knuckles went white on the steering wheel. "Pick up, you coward." "Pick up," Mercer answered on the 3rd ring. "Hello, Donovan." Donovan let out a ragged sob of relief. "Mercer, listen to me. I know you fired me. I know you want nothing to do with me, but you have to help me right now. I have copies of the internal emails. I have the offshore shipping manifest. If I go down, I'm pulling the company down with me. I'll hand everything to the IRS. I'll tell them Drumright Logistics is a fraud." He was bluffing completely. His laptop was fried, and his cloud access had been revoked. But desperation has a way of making men believe their own lies. "I need $50,000, Donovan shouted, his voice splitting. "Cash. And I need a boat. Get me out of this country, and you never hear my name again." There was a pause on the line, then a click. The audio quality shifted. "You are on speaker, Donovan." A deep, unmistakable voice came through. Donovan went cold. He knew that voice. It was the voice of the man who had taken apart his life one piece at a time. Corny Donovan breathed. "It is Mr. Drumright to you," Cornelius corrected. "And you have nothing, Donovan. The files you believe you're sitting on were dummy logs I built specifically to catch thieves like you. Go right ahead. Call the IRS. They are already looking for you." Donovan slammed his palm against the dashboard. "You destroyed me. You took my wife. You took everything. You took your own life when you chose to become a criminal," Cornelius said, unmoved. "But I am feeling generous today. I will give you one final chance." Donovan's heart lurched. "What?" "I will give you a head start," Cornelius said. "I know exactly where you are. I am tracking your phone. The police are closing in from the north side, but the south bridge is open." Donovan glanced at the GPS. He was 10 minutes from the south bridge. "If you can reach the old shipyard in 5 minutes, there is a container ship departing for Panama." Cornelius said, "I have a contact on the ground there. Get to that dock in 5 minutes, and you might just vanish." "Why would you do this for me?" Donovan asked, suspicious but too desperate to refuse. "Because I want you gone," Cornelius answered. "I want you as far from my daughter as possible." 5 minutes, Donovan. The clock is running now." The line cut out. Donovan didn't stop to think. He didn't pause to question why the man he had wronged would throw him a rope. He just mashed the gas pedal to the floor. The old sedan groaned beneath him, but lurched forward. He carved through traffic, cutting off cars riding the shoulder. He spotted the shipyard ahead, the cranes looming like steel giants against the dark sky. He checked the clock. 3 minutes. He could make it. He was going to slip free. He was going to survive, and someday he would come back to settle the score. He smashed through the chain-link gate tires, screaming on the pavement. He skidded around a wall of shipping containers and jolted to a stop at the designated dock. He threw open the door and swept his eyes across the water, searching for the ship. There was no ship. The dock sat empty. The water was flat and black. There was no captain waiting to carry him off to some distant shoreline. There was only cold wind off the harbor and the thick smell of salt and rust. Donovan spun around, understanding only then that he had been steered straight into a trap. But it wasn't the police waiting for him. It wasn't Cornelius. Sitting back in the shadow of a container stack was a matte black luxury sedan. Its headlights snapped on, flooding Donovan's eyes. 2 men climbed out. No uniforms. They wore expensive leather jackets and carried themselves with the relaxed ease of men accustomed to violence. One of them had a baseball bat. Donovan recognized them. He knew those faces from the back rooms of casinos. They were the collection agents for the loan sharks he owed $200,000 to. Well, the man with the bat said, grinning. Look who decided to show up. We got a tip you might be heading this way. Donovan backpedaled, hands raised. No, please. I can pay. Just give me time. You are out of time, Donovan, the man said, slapping the bat against his open palm. You have been dodging us for months, and then we see on the news you were trying to skip town. That is bad for business. Corny set me up, Donovan screamed. He sent me here. The man rolled his shoulders. We don't know any Corny. We got an anonymous text with a location, and here you are. Donovan broke into a run, but his legs were spent and sluggish. The second man brought him down before he cleared 2 steps. He slammed into the concrete hard, every bit of air driven out of him. He rolled and tried to claw his way forward, but the man with the bat was already standing over him. This is going to hurt, the man said flatly. The first blow broke his kneecap. Donovan's scream tore across the empty shipyard. The second blow caved into his ribs and stole the air from his chest. He curled into a ball, trying to shield his head, sobbing, begging for it to stop. But the underworld does not deal in mercy. He had borrowed money he had no way to repay, and now the debt was being collected in flesh. He had no idea how long it went on. It felt like hours. It was probably only minutes. He lay in a spreading pool of his own blood, his body shattered. Every expensive dream he had ever chased ground down to nothing. He stared up at the sky, his vision swimming. He thought this was the end. Then he caught the flashing lights. Red and blue strobes bounced hard off the shipping containers. Sirens swelled, growing louder by the second. The thugs heard them too. They looked at one another. Cops, the man with the bat muttered, "Time to go." They dropped the bat and melted into the shadows of the shipyard, leaving Donovan flat on the cold concrete, broken and alone. Donovan watched the police cruisers fishtail onto the dock. Officers poured out with weapons up, barking orders. Freeze, hands where I can see them. Donovan couldn't manage his hands. One of his arms was shattered, but he made the effort anyway. He strained to lift his head. He looked at those officers not with dread, but with something close to pure gratitude. "Help me," he rasped, blood gathering at his lips. The officers moved in carefully. They took in what was left of him. Their weapons dipped slightly, though none were holstered. "Donovan Ashford, you are under arrest," one officer announced, stepping in to cuff him. Donovan started to laugh. It was a wet, gurgling sound. He was going to prison. He was going to forfeit his freedom. But prison had walls. Prison had guards. Prison was safe from men with bats. "Thank you," he whispered as the handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists. "Thank you. Please take me. Take me out of here. Lock me up. Just don't let them come back." They hauled him toward the squad car. He offered no resistance. His limp body was folded into the back seat. As the car pulled away, Donovan turned his head toward the window. High up on a crane overlooking the dock, he thought he made out a silhouette, a man in a suit watching from above, a man with a cane. "Corny," he thought. "You won." He let his eyes fall shut and surrendered to the dark, terrified of what would greet him when he surfaced again, but grateful that for this one night, the beating had stopped. He had wanted a life built on luxury. What he had earned instead was a life built on survival, and somewhere beneath the pain, he knew he deserved every last second of it. The antiseptic smell of the private hospital room was sharp and cold, a hard contrast to the warm summer afternoon pressing against the window. Lyra lay in the bed, looking small and fragile against the white sheets. Her face was drained of color, her eyes still swollen from days of weeping. She was recovering from severe dehydration and nervous exhaustion, the physical cost of having her life torn apart in front of the entire world. I sat in the chair beside her, a paring knife in my hand, carefully peeling an orange in one long, continuous strip. The quiet rhythm of the blade against the fruit was the only sound in the room. I didn't say a word. I didn't lecture. I simply sat there being the father she had forgotten I was capable of being. Lyra stirred, wincing as she pushed herself upright. She looked at me, then turned her eyes away, fixing them on her hands lying across the blanket. Her shame filled the room like a physical presence, heavy and suffocating. "You should hate me," she whispered, her voice worn to a rasp. I carved off a slice of orange and held it out to her. She shook her head. "I don't hate you, Lyra," I said quietly. "I signed the papers." "Dad," She choked on the word, tears sliding free. I signed the papers to have you locked away. I stood there and let them drag you out of your own home. I chose him. I chose a monster because he gave me beautiful things and told me I was everything. I am so stupid. I am so sorry. She pressed both hands over her face, her whole body shaking with sobs. It was the apology I had been waiting for through all of it, but it gave me no satisfaction. Watching my daughter shattered in front of me was not a victory. It was a failure I hadn't managed to prevent. You are not stupid, Lyra, I said, setting the knife down on the table. You were blinded. That is what love does. It lays a filter over everything you see. You saw what you needed to see. You wanted a fairy tale, and Donovan was a very gifted storyteller. But you knew, she cried. You knew the whole time. Why didn't you step in sooner? Why did you let it come to all of this? I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. Because you would not have heard me. If I had told you Donovan was a thief 6 months ago, would you have believed it? Or would you have told me I was a jealous old man? If I had pulled you out of every hard place you ran into, would you have ever learned to climb out yourself? You needed to see his real face, Lyra, and unfortunately monsters only drop the mask when they believe they have already won. Lyra held my gaze, searching it for the answer to the question that had been sitting with her since the wedding. Why did you hide it, Dad? She asked. The money. The company. Why did you live the way you did? If I had known you were a billionaire, none of this would have ever happened. That is precisely why I kept it hidden, I replied without hesitation. I rose from the chair and moved to the window, looking out over the city skyline. When your mother died, something terrifying became clear to me. I could purchase anything on earth, but I couldn't purchase character. I couldn't purchase loyalty, and I certainly couldn't purchase love. I watched my friends' other wealthy men raise children who turned into spoiled, entitled adults. They married people who were in love with their bank accounts, not with them. I refused to let that be your life. I turned back to face her. I wanted you to be loved for who you are, Lyra, not for being the heiress to Drumright Logistics. If I had put my wealth on display, Donovan would have still married you. He would have moved even faster. He would have been the picture-perfect son-in-law, smiling agreeable, biding his time, and waiting patiently for me to die so he could step into the empire. You would never have seen the snake until it had already swallowed you whole. By concealing what I had, I forced him to reveal what he was. He assumed you had no safety net, so he treated you as if you were disposable. That is how you measure a man, Lyra. Not by how he treats a CEO, by how he treats someone who can do absolutely nothing for him. Lyra took in my words. The understanding washed over her slowly. The poverty had been a filter, a test that Donovan had failed with flying colors. He never loved me. She whispered the truth, finally landing somewhere deep inside her. He just needed a way through the door, and when he thought it was locked, he tried to tear it off the hinges. I walked back to the bed and took her hand. It was cold, but she held mine tight. He loved what you could offer him, I said, but that is behind us now. He is gone. He is in a cage exactly where he belongs, and you are still here. You are safe. Lyra looked down at our hands. I don't know where to go from here, Dad. I have nothing. I lost the apartment. I lost my job from the scandal. I am 28 years old, and all I have to show for it is guilt by association and a broken heart. You have something worth more than you know, I said. You have a clean slate. I reached into the inner pocket of my jacket and drew out a small velvet pouch. Lyra stiffened slightly, maybe expecting jewelry, maybe bracing for another lesson. I opened the pouch and let the contents fall into her palm. It was a single silver key. It is not a mansion, I said, and it is not charity. It is an apartment in New York City, small, a 4th floor walk-up. But it is in a decent neighborhood, and the rent is covered for 1 year. Lyra turned the key over her brow, creasing. You are sending me away. I am sending you to find yourself, I said. In this city, you will always be the girl who married the con man. You will always be the billionaire's daughter. In New York, you are simply Lyra. Nobody knows your name. Nobody has any interest in your father. I reached into my pocket again and produced a business card. This belongs to a friend of mine who runs a non-profit art gallery in Brooklyn. I know you loved painting before Donovan convinced you it was a waste of your time. She has an opening for an assistant, minimum wage. You will need to budget carefully. You will ride the subway. You will work hard for it. But it will be your work, your own life. Lyra closed her fingers around the key. She looked at me, fresh tears rising, but these were different tears of relief rather than grief. You are not going to hand me millions. she asked, a small, fragile smile crossing her lips. I smiled back at her. I will give you the same thing I gave Donovan. Independence. The difference is I believe you know what to do with it. The money will be waiting, Lyra, when I am gone or when you have proven to yourself you no longer need it. Until then, go and live. Make mistakes that belong to you. Find a man who loves you when you have nothing. She pulled me into a hug, her face pressed into my shoulder. Thank you, Daddy. Thank you for saving me. I kissed the top of her head. I didn't save you, Lyra. I just opened the cage. Now you have to fly. I left her there holding the key to whatever came next. I walked out of the hospital, feeling lighter than I had in years. My daughter was safe. Wounded, yes, but free. The hardest part was behind me. There was only one thing left, one final loose end to close before I could truly step back and rest. I made my way to the waiting Rolls-Royce. Take me to the state penitentiary, Darnell, I said. I have a visitation appointment. The heavy steel door of the maximum security visitation room sealed shut behind me with a finality that resonated in my chest. It had been exactly 1 year since that night at the hotel, 365 days since Donovan Ashford had tried to raze my life to the ground. The air inside the prison carried the smell of industrial cleaner and quiet despair, the kind of scent that works its way into everything. I settled onto the hard plastic stool on the free side of the plexiglass barrier. I straightened my cufflinks the gold, catching the flat fluorescent light above. I waited. When the guards walked him in, I nearly didn't know him. The man who shuffled toward the glass was not the arrogant chest-forward executive in a white tuxedo. He was a ghost. His head was shaved down to a scarred scalp, evidence of fights he had clearly lost. His skin was sallow, the shade of old paper, and he had shed at least 30's LEB. The orange jumpsuit draped off his frame like it belonged to someone else. He lowered himself into the seat slowly, as if his body was one long bruise. He kept his eyes down, at first studying his hands calloused and unsteady. He reached for the black receiver. I did the same. "Hello, Donovan," I said. He raised his eyes to meet mine. They were flat drained of the heat that had once powered his ambition. But when they landed on my suit, the precise tailoring the watch at my wrist, a flicker of the old hatred stirred behind them. "You came?" He rasped, his voice stripped rough from disuse. "I told you I would," I replied. He let out a dry, hollow laugh. "You came to gloat. You came to look at the animal in the cage. Does it feel good, Corny? Does it make you feel like a man to see me this way?" I regarded him without any expression. I didn't feel powerful. I didn't feel diminished. I felt nothing at all. He was a ledger entry that had been closed, a bad investment written off and forgotten. "I didn't come to gloat, Donovan," I said quietly. "I came to find out whether you had learned anything." "Learned anything?" he sneered, pushing closer to the glass. "I learned that money can buy its way around any problem. I learned that the whole system is crooked. You set me up. You laid the trap." "You set yourself up," I said. "You dug the hole, Donovan. I simply handed you the shovel. You had a good position. You had a wife who genuinely loved you. You had a real future ahead of you. But none of it was ever enough. You wanted what I had built without ever building anything yourself." He drove his hand against the partition. It landed with a dull thud. "I deserved it," he hissed. "I worked for it. I was the best salesman on your team, and you were sitting on millions buried in the ground. Speaking of the ground, tell me, Corny, what about the land? Did you sell it? Did you pocket the 12 million? Are you out there somewhere spending money that should have been mine?" I leaned back and crossed my legs. This was the moment, the final nail. "I didn't sell the land, Donovan." He blinked. "What?" "I didn't sell it," I repeated, "and I didn't keep it for myself either." His face tightened. "Then what did you do with it?" "That is prime real estate. You said so yourself." "I donated it," I said. Donovan went absolutely still. The air left him. "Donated it. Every acre," I went on. "The deed was transferred 6 months ago. The cabin came down last week. Construction is already underway." "Construction on what?" He whispered, something like horror beginning to dawn across his face. "The Odette Drumright Home for Children," I said. "It will be the largest orphanage and foster care support center in this state. It will provide a home for 200 children, with nowhere else to turn education meals and a real chance at a life you threw away without a second thought." "No," Donovan breathed. "No. You threw away $12 million on orphans." "You are lying. You are lying just to hurt me." I reached into my jacket pocket, drew out a folded piece of paper, and held it flat against the glass. It was a photocopy of the dedication plaque. "Read it, Donovan." He leaned in and squinted. His eyes moved across the text. "Dedicated to the memory of Odette Drumright. Land donated by Cornelius Drumright. Valued at $12.5 million. He let the phone drop. It swung on its metal cord and knocked against the wall. He stared at me, mouth hanging open in a silent howl of anguish. For a man like Donovan, losing money was one kind of pain, but knowing that money had been given away handed over to charity, spent on people who could never pay it back, that was something altogether different. That was torture. It fractured something in him. He couldn't process a world where character outweighed capital. He lunged for the swinging receiver, his hands trembling badly. "You are crazy," he screamed into it. "You are out of your mind. That money could have pulled me out. That money could have bought me a completely different life. You handed it to trash." "Those children are not trash," I said, my voice going hard. "They are the future. You are the trash, Donovan. You are the waste. You believed money would rescue you. You believed that enough zeros in your account would make you a king, but you forgot the single most important rule in business and in life." I leaned in close, holding his terrified gaze. "Your net worth is not your self-worth. You are sitting in here because you are morally bankrupt. No amount of money can post bail on that." I set the receiver down. Donovan started screaming. He beat his fists against the glass partition. He cursed me. He cursed Lyra. He cursed the entire world. The guards closed in, seizing him by the shoulders. They hauled him backward, his heels dragging across the floor, his screams growing faint as they pulled him back toward his cell. I watched until he was gone. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I simply rose, buttoned my jacket, and turned my back on the man who had tried to dismantle my family. He was finished. He was a closed chapter. I walked out of the visitation room and through the series of security checkpoints. Heavy metal doors buzzed and clicked open one after another, releasing me back into the world. I pushed through the prison entrance and into the fierce afternoon sun. The air tasted sweet. It tasted clean. At the curb sat the black Rolls-Royce. Mercer was posted by the rear door, glancing at his watch. He looked up as I came down the steps, a quiet smile on his face. "How did it go?" Mr. Mercer asked, pulling the door open for me. "Productive," I said. "The account is closed." Mercer gave a single nod. "Good. The board is assembled and waiting, Mr. Drumright. The merger with the European shipping line is on the table, and they will not move forward without your signature." I looked back at the prison one final time. It was a gray, graceless structure, a monument to poor decisions. I thought about the cabin in the woods. I thought about Lyra in New York, working on her first collection of paintings. I thought about the orphanage rising up from the cleared ground. Then I turned away and stepped into the car. The leather seat was cool and welcoming. "Let us go, Mercer," I said. "There is work to do." The car eased away from the curb and moved silently down the highway. I took out my phone, the new smartphone Lyra had insisted I get so we could video chat. I pulled up the calendar. I had a board meeting at 2:00, a charity gala at 6:00, and a video call with my daughter at 9:00. And that in the end is how the story of Cornelius Drumright closes, not with revenge in the usual sense, but with something quieter and far more permanent. Justice. I have thought many times about what this road cost me. Years lived in the shadow of a secret. My daughter's trust nearly shattered beyond repair. A cabin I loved reduced to rubble. But I believe God does not allow a man to be tested beyond what he can carry, and every loss along the way cleared space for something worth far more. The Odette Drumright Home for Children stands where that land once sat idle. 200 children will grow up with a roof, a meal, and a chance. That is not a consolation prize. That is the whole point. If this family revenge story taught me anything worth passing on here, it is. First, the way a man treats someone who can do nothing for him tells you everything about who he really is. Watch that always. Second, hiding your resources is not weakness. Sometimes it is the only honest test of another person's character left available to you. Third, do not confuse a person's bank balance with their worth. Your integrity is the one asset that cannot be seized, frozen, or donated away. And fourth, if you are a person over 50 who has been underestimated, dismissed, or pushed aside by someone younger and louder, remember that patience is not passivity, it is preparation. For everyone in the adults 50-plus community who has ever had to prove themselves to people who should have known better, this story was for you. If it moved you, leave a comment below and tell me what stayed with you. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that quiet strength is still strength. And if you are not already with us, subscribe to Honor Revenge Stories. There is always another chapter worth hearing. Thank you truly for being here today. Until next time, take care of yourself and take care of each other.